All right, welcome back to the Powers on Sports podcast. I'm your host, Jason Powers. We are hitting the Big 12 conference as part of our conference previews. We are hitting all the Power 5 conferences, and we got nobody better to cover the Big 12 than Tyler Jones. Tyler Jones is of the Tyler Jones Report podcast, the Jones Report podcast. Tyler's an anchor for local news live TV out of Omaha, Nebraska. Seen on over 100 stations around the country. Tyler's a huge Big 12 follower, does all things, went to KU in Lawrence, worked in the Lawrence market for many years in sports radio. So the pleasure is to have Tyler back on the podcast yet again. Welcome, Tyler.
Jason, appreciate the time as always, my man, and catching up. It's been a minute, but glad to see that you're doing well and that we can always talk some football around here. It's that time of year again, best time of year. I was telling somebody just last night, I always feel a void in my life when it's not football season. So now we're coming full circle and about to really rev it up here and have a fun next couple months ahead.
Yeah, we are less than 2 weeks away from when we're recording this to Labor Day weekend. Obviously, I know there's some games that Thursday night before Labor Day, but it kind of everybody gets kicked off Labor Day weekend. All right, let's get right to it. Big 12. Lots of news around the Big 12 this offseason. The biggest news, obviously, Oklahoma, Texas, bolting to the SEC here coming up in a couple of years. Just your thoughts. What are the general thoughts of people that live in your part of the country about OU and Texas saying sayonara?
Well, for Oklahoma and Texas, it's great for them. They're making a move that makes sense in every way. I mean, it just means more, as they say. The money was too good to pass up. I can't blame them at all for making this move and to go this route. The Big 12 has just been run by a bunch of village idiots, and they had enough of it. It was time to move on. So for Oklahoma and Texas, that's great. Makes sense. Makes all the sense in the world for them to make this move to the SEC, to put themselves in this situation where, we're still not out of this pandemic yet. Teams are still looking for every dollar they can, and these athletic departments are on shoestring budgets right now. And so I think this kind of sped up the process where both schools are like, look, we would be doing ourselves a disservice if we're not making the most money we can. And so that's where this move to the SEC, I think, got sped up a bit is due to COVID, partially speaking. But as far as the rest of the Big 12 goes, this is awful. This is bad news for Oklahoma and Texas to be making this move to the SEC, because now everybody is left to kind of fend for themselves. I mean, the Big 12, if it stays intact, will lose about 50% of its revenue. And everyone else is going to be fighting for every dollar they can. So the best case for these schools is to go on their own and try to find another home within one of the other Power 4 conferences, so they can continue to get that money and be in good financial shape. Otherwise, they're going to be in some big trouble dealing with half the money they're making right now if they're to stay in the Big 12. So a team like Kansas, you're hoping that even though your football program's just been awful the last decade plus, that your basketball program is good enough to get you in a conference like the Big 10 or the ACC. Oklahoma State, they're sitting there with numbers that actually look pretty good for TV. They were 19th last year of all schools in TV ratings. And so you're trying to pump that up and look at what you've done as an athletic department as a whole, and hoping that's good enough to get you somewhere. In the case of Iowa State, you got a really solid football program that Matt Campbell's built, and you look at that being a way to try to push you up there. They are an AAU institution, as is Kansas, so maybe that helps their case for the Big Ten. So everybody's kind of just trying to figure things out at this point. No one knows what's going to happen. If anyone acts like they know what's happening, they're kind of full of themselves here. But I think these schools, Jason, were more confident about their expansion, about where they could go before this alliance talk came up between the Big Ten, Pac-12, and ACC. But with that, everybody's kind of just left wondering, okay, what now?
Do you see a scenario where the Big 12 stays together and then they try to go out and recruit a Central Florida, Houston, and SMU to fill in some of the gaps. I know it's not going to be Oklahoma, Texas level of program, but do you think the Big 12, that's their goal, is to stay together? Or do you think it's going to ultimately disintegrate?
I think it just depends on who you are. I think if you're a team like Oklahoma State, Iowa State, Kansas, you're looking at your prospects and, you're doing everything you can to get out. If you're a school like TCU, realistically, nobody probably wants you. Their chancellor's already come out and said that they want to make the Big 12 great again. And that, they're looking to add schools and they want to expand the conference. So everybody's got a different agenda. It just depends really where you're at as far as this league goes. I think Oklahoma and Texas want this league to dissolve because the faster they can get to the SEC with less fees to pay. I think ESPN wants this league to dissolve and get out of this contract. So we'll just see what happens. It's certainly unstable. That's been the case for the last 10 years. When we saw Colorado, Nebraska, Texas A&M, and Missouri leave, what didn't change now that should have changed from what happened then was the league has been so reactionary.
Right.
They're not a forward-thinking league, and that's been the issue. That's what the problem was back then, and still the problem to this day.
Yeah, I was just going to make that point. Is the SEC, people have their opinions about the SEC, but when they have a target of something, they go after it. They are proactive, and if they ruffle some feathers, they don't really care. They try to do what they think's best for the SEC, and that's why they have become the dominant conference in college football.
No question about it. And Greg Sankey has done a terrific job. I think that you can almost view him as the commissioner of college football, it feels like. This is the guy that saved the college football season from happening last year after, conferences like the Big Ten or the Pac-12 wanted to cancel the season altogether. And Sankey stepped up and put a plan together to have the season happen. And now you see this move of bringing in Oklahoma and Texas and their new TV deal with ABC for the Game of the Week package. They're going from $50 million a year from CBS to about $450 million just for that deal alone. I mean, Oklahoma and Texas, Jason, are going to make more money from this first tier deal with ABC for the Game of the Week than they were making for the tier 1, 2, and 3 deals from the Big 12. So the money was just too much to pass out.
It'll be interesting to see it will be interesting to see though how Texas and Oklahoma react, because they've used to being the big dogs of the Big 12, where now they won't be the number 1 and 2 draw of the SEC. They might be 3, 4, or 5, depending on Alabama, Georgia, LSU, Auburn.
Well, I'll say this: Texas, still has problems. I agree on Texas, but Oklahoma, I think, is going to come in and compete right away.
Okay.
In the SEC, I think that you look at this Oklahoma program, and when you factor in the transfers that Lincoln Riley has been able to bring in, like this past recruiting class, they would have actually been the number 1 recruiting class ahead of Alabama when you factor in the transfers. I mean, they are doing an incredible job. They are winning the transfer portal each and every year. And so I think Oklahoma is going to compete right away. And sure, they've had their struggles in these playoff games, but that's when you've had 3 or 4 weeks to prepare. And their defense is a whole lot better now than what it was just even a couple of years ago. I think these SEC teams are in for quite the challenge to prepare for Oklahoma each and every week for that offense, for that game plan that Lincoln Riley puts together. And the way they split up these divisions here, I mean, we could be talking about Oklahoma and Alabama in the SEC title game every single year. I mean, I think that things are going to play into Oklahoma's favor where they're not playing, Florida and Georgia and Alabama and Auburn every single year. Sure, you might see LSU or Texas A&M, but I mean, I think they're up for that challenge. I think Oklahoma is going to be just fine competing in the SEC. In fact, they might even be better because the iron sharpens iron type of ordeal where they'll be potentially more prepared for the playoffs and these playoff games after going through that gauntlet of an SEC schedule. I think the Big 12, with playing a softer schedule, did them a disservice. It did not have them ready for these playoffs the last few years.
Right. And needless to say, you talk Oklahoma, the talk is defense in Oklahoma this year. Lots of people think the defense is going to be way better. Obviously you have Spencer Rattler coming back and Lincoln Riley's offense, but a lot of talk out of Norman about how good the defense could be potentially at Oklahoma, and that could be the difference this year to really get them over the top, especially when you get to the playoff.
Well, look at that bowl game, the Cotton Bowl against Florida, and they just shut down Kyle Trask. Yep. They picked him off 3 times in the first quarter of that game. And this Oklahoma defense really emerged in the second half of last year. Guys like Turner Yell and company just leading the way on that side of the ball. Alex Grinch has done a terrific job as the defensive coordinator there for the Sooners. And that's an elite defense. And as much as we talk about Spencer Rattler, who I think is my pick to win the Heisman Trophy and be the number 1 pick in the draft, and all the weapons that they have offensively, that defense is really good and it's come a long way. They're going to give some people some problems. I really like what Oklahoma puts together on both sides of the ball in 2021.
Yeah, and like I said, their key to continuity moving forward, especially going to the SEC, is Lincoln Riley going to stay there? Is he going to take an NFL job? Will they be able to keep Grinch? Will he get it? He's eventually probably going to get a head coaching job somewhere. To me, that's going to be the interesting thing, is how long does Lincoln Riley want to stay to go to the SEC, or does he want to jump to that NFL job in these next couple of years?
Well, and that's a good point, but you look at Lincoln Riley, he's had plenty of opportunities to jump to the NFL at this point. And I'm sure he's passed up on some very good jobs. But Jason, I bet you would agree with this too. There's certain jobs in college football that are just simply better than most NFL jobs. And Oklahoma is one of those jobs. I mean, just a couple of years back when Mike McCarthy got the Cowboys job, everybody thought Lincoln Riley was going to Dallas. And I said, look, Jerry Jones is full of himself and he's still GM. Everyone knows that, that's a problem when Jerry's still in charge. If you're Lincoln Riley, I think he's self-aware of that and knows he's got a better thing going in Norman. And sure he wasn't interested. I don't think Lincoln Riley wants to leave Oklahoma until at least he brings a national championship to the Sooners before he could potentially make a move. And he actually has no connections to the NFL either. He's not an NFL guy. So he's made his name there in Norman. And I think he's going to be there a long time. Alex Grinch, I do think is going to get a head coaching job sooner than later, though. But I would be surprised to see if Lincoln Riley is leaving Norman anytime soon.
And remember, people don't realize Lincoln Riley's only 38 years old. He's not like he's 45. I mean, he's still in his mid to late 30s. So it might be better for him career-wise to wait till he's 41, 42 before he really seriously explores an NFL job.
Right. Well, and what does the NFL have to offer that he doesn't have at Oklahoma? I mean, you're going to be playing in front of crowds of 85,000, and players are getting paid now, the NIL money and such. Yep. And, you're on national TV every single week. He's getting paid just as good as these NFL coaches too. Yep. Lincoln Riley's very aware. He's got a good thing going, and he's in control there at Oklahoma. The NFL, you're talking about, dealing with GMs and, other personnel that kind of, lead the way and such. And I think that Lincoln likes being the boss and controlling his program, doing things his way.
All right, let's transition down south. Let's go to Austin, Texas. Tom Herman given the boot at the end of last year. Steve Sarkisian comes aboard from Alabama, the OC at Alabama. Obviously, Sarkisian's had a couple of other head coaching jobs, USC, Washington. He's had his off the field problems. How do you think that move played in Austin, and what are your thoughts leading into training camp here this year with Sarkisian at Texas?
I think going from Tom Herman to Steve Sarkisian was like going from Applebee's to Chili's. I don't see a big difference between the two. They're both the same guy. They're both just kind of average head coaches. They're not bad coaches, but they're not great either. Sark, you look at what he did at Washington. He leaves there, gets replaced by Chris Peterson, and Washington fans are excited. They got an upgrade in the process. He goes down to USC, and things are going okay before ultimately he was dismissed with his drinking problems. I don't think that's going to be an issue. He's well beyond that. He's addressed his demons head on about that. That's not a concern for me at all for Sark as far as that goes. But if there is one thing that Sark has going for him that maybe Herman didn't, is that Steve Sarkisian gets the SEC. I mean, you look at what he did at Alabama, and all the staff that he's hired around him are SEC guys. And this is the first time that Texas is trying to build themselves with the model of an SEC program. Charlie Strong was from Louisville. Mac Brown years ago, was a North Carolina guy and such. So they're trying to do things in SEC way. So that to me is the big thing for Sark that could be a difference for them. Now, with Texas, you're talking about a program that still is going to have to compete with Oklahoma. Oklahoma is not slowing down anytime soon, and your level of competition is about to kick up a whole lot as well, going to the SEC. The thing that looks good for Texas, I think, going forward as far as this SEC move is they are weakening Texas A&M in the process. Texas A&M had that advantage of being the one Texas school in the SEC and really got to leverage that in their recruiting. Now you make this move to the SEC, and Texas gets to weaken Texas A&M in the process. I don't know what Sark's going to do. I don't have high expectations for him. I don't expect them to be any better than what they are right now. It'd be an 8-9 win program. But, you look at where all the resources Texas has and all the talent they're able to recruit and such, there's no reason why Texas can't succeed. All the stuff is there. It's just a matter of if Sark can put it together or not. I think this year, kind of a rebuilding year. Yes, they have some talent. I think they can win 7-8 games. I don't think Sark is going to be judged based on this year. It's going to be on the next couple of years to see where it goes.
Yeah, and Sark, say what you want about Sark. He is a brilliant offensive mind, play caller, play designer, and that can sometimes overcome not having the quality of athlete at the position. But if you have a dominant play caller, which he is on the offensive side of the ball, obviously the Texas defense has always seems to be the bugaboo down in Austin the last several years. So, and the mentality of Texas, they've always kind of been deemed as a soft program, a little bit soft down there in Austin. So interesting to see how he brings his SEC, mindset, like you said, working for Saban, how that's going to translate in Austin.
But even with that said, none of these Saban assistants have been able to beat him, not one time. So we could talk about that, he's doing things the SEC way and all that. Well, how well has that necessarily worked for these Saban assistants either? Not so hot. Some of them have been good, don't get me wrong, but it's not like it's just a guaranteed recipe that's going to be the difference between Texas of old to what they are now.
All right, let's go to your neck of the woods. Lawrence, Kansas. The Les Miles experiment kind of blew up in their face. Everybody thought that there might be a chance for them to at least be competitive. That didn't work out. Les obviously had his off the field issues. What are your thoughts just about that whole situation in Lawrence?
It was embarrassing for Kansas. For a university that went 0-9 last year, to find one way to be more embarrassing than an 0-9 season was pretty on brand for Kansas football. I went to Kansas, so I can, be honest with them. I can give that tough love, but it was a bad offseason to see those things occur and how Jeff Long handled that. This was a guy that didn't want to pay David Beatty, who was rightfully owed, his full contract and such. They ended up going to court, and eventually they lose that lawsuit. And yet he was willing to pay off Les Miles for his silence and such. I hated how that was handled, and Jeff Long was rightfully fired. But now you bring in a new head coach in Lance Leipold from Buffalo, and there's a lot of optimism about Lance Leipold, what he's bringing to the Jayhawks. This guy won several national titles at the D3 level. He did a really good job at Buffalo. He's an older guy, he's in his mid-50s, so you don't necessarily expect him to be trying to bounce around, that this could be his last stop, or at least you would hope that he gets
7, 8 years.
Get to a point that he leaves them in much better shape than he found it. But as far as leaving them in much better shape, one thing I will say about Les Miles is this roster is as good as it's been in a long time. He recruited very well there. They did a really good job of focusing in on high school talent. I mean, since the Charlie Weiss days, they haven't been at 85 scholarship players just based on how things have really just been screwed up there. Now they're the closest they've ever been to that 85 scholarship number in a long time. So there's reason to be optimistic about this Kansas football program, what they're going to do going forward. I think that they can win a game or two in the Big 12 this year. Same story that we've talked about ever since Todd Reesing left town. They don't have a quarterback. They're trying to figure out who that quarterback is.
Right.
But, the expectation in Lawrence, they'll build a statue for you if you win 6 or 7 games every year. And that's all Lance Leipold has to do. And I don't think that's far off from happening. It's just a matter of when, not if. And I think he can be the guy to get Kansas to that point and get to where they want to be. I mean, you're still a basketball school primarily. Everyone knows that. They just want to be competitive. They're not asking for much, and I don't think that's too much to ask for.
Good, great insight. All right, I'm going to jump off topic. I'm going to ask you a basketball question real quick since you're so dialed into KU. Any updates on the whole scandal, the Adidas deal with Bill Self in the last 6-8 months?
Well, the investigation's been handed off to the IARP, the group that is reviewing, from the third party perspective. And the way that works is that, this organization is separate from the NCAA, and part of the agreement to have them make the decision is that there is no appeals process. Once a decision is made, it's final. Well, right. That group was formed in 2018, and they have not made a single decision ever in any case since they launched. So, we were all sitting here, everything was turned in and was ready to go. We all expected a ruling to be made at some point last year, and it just simply didn't happen. And now here we are a year later and still nothing. Everything's pretty quiet and such. I would expect just one day out of the blue when we least expect it, something is going to drop about this situation here. There's really no precedent. We have no idea what is going to happen with what Kansas is going to be dealt with here. And you look at NIL, I mean, it certainly makes Kansas look a lot better because what they did what they're accused of,
right,
would actually be a legal thing in today's college sports world and such. So right. Who knows what's going to happen? Whether it's a postseason ban or loss of scholarships, whatever. I mean, something is going to happen at some point, but we just don't know when. We're kind of just playing the waiting game at this point to see what happens. I do know one thing, though, for sure. Bill Self has made his commitment to the University of Kansas known ever since this investigation started all the way back to the FBI days. He said that he is committed to staying to KU, to getting them through this process. He's already had plenty of opportunities to jump ship, whether it be to other college jobs or take an NBA job and get away from all this, but he's riding things out. And I think that as long as Kansas has Bill Self, everything's going to be okay and be just fine. And Bill Self is actually a big part of this realignment talks as far as their move to potential conference. Everything from I've heard from my sources is they feel really good about the position they're in. And that athletic department is kind of being quiet right now. And comparatively speaking to March, when this Les Miles stuff was going on, I think quiet's a good thing. I think the fact that not much is going on, you look at Oklahoma and Texas, everything was real quiet there until Texas A&M leaked and said something. So I think the vibes around this Kansas athletic department just as a whole right now are pretty good, comparably speaking to what they were even just a few months ago on all fronts.
How is the NIL agreements and the ability for all these kids to get their own deals? How is that played in a place like Lawrence, where that's the only game in town? Is that something that those kids are going to be able to really take advantage of, whether it's the football, basketball, the women's, whatever the other good sports are at Kansas? How is that played in a city like Lawrence, or even where you're at in Omaha?
Yeah, well, I think about this. Let's take football, for example. Okay. Kansas is going after the guys that are getting the last scholarships available at your Oklahoma and Texas, schools to be your number one and number two recruits. And essentially, you could have more to offer as far as NIL opportunities for those recruits, that, hey, you're going to be the big dog on campus. There's been several players over the years. I think one in particular, Amani Bledsoe. This guy was a 4-star recruit out of Lawrence High School. And, he was recruited highly by Kansas since he was a freshman. And, they came to him and said, hey, you're going to be the big man on campus. You're going to start day one. This town's going to love you and such. And he opted to go to Oklahoma and had a really good career. And now he's playing in the NFL for the Bengals. But those guys like that, now you can say, look, not only are you going to be the big man on campus here and you're going to start all 4 years, but we're going to offer you the farm. You're going to have all these money opportunities aren't going to have at some of these other places. So that's what's going to keep them competitive. Kansas as a donor base, one of the things they talk about is they don't have a whole lot of donors for their athletics fund, but they have one of the largest financial donation bases in the Big 12, only behind Oklahoma and Texas. So one of the big things they're trying to encourage now with this move potentially out of the Big 12 to a new conference is, hey, they just need some smaller donors to get involved. They need some money raised beyond just the big time donors, that they need more of those small donations. So that's what they're looking for. And, this NIL stuff, I think Kansas is going to be in great shape, and they're still going to get all the basketball talent they want and be able to offer them things. Heck, even Mitch Lightfoot, who has been there 5-6 years and been a role player for Kansas on the basketball side. This guy's already racked up a couple endorsement deals and is making his name known. And so there's going to be opportunities for everybody. Kansas is going to be just fine, and I think they're going to benefit from NIL.
And all these small, Big 12 teams that are the only game in town are going to have that advantage where it's going to really help everybody. It's going to shrink the margin a little bit when you can get a kid to go to Lubbock, Texas, because he can still make a couple $100,000 a year on the NIL circuit and around Lubbock and that whole area. And that's going to help everybody around the country.
Yeah, for sure. And one thing that I love too about this NIL stuff that I don't think we're talking about enough is the opportunity for walk-ons.
Yes.
And you look at BYU, everyone there is getting their school paid for now. They had a company step up and say, we're going to take care of tuition for all the walk-ons. And so everybody's taken care of. And you see what the NCAA was doing, just taking away those opportunities from athletes to have just their school paid for, just some money to, go have a good Friday night and stuff like that. This changes the game. I'm all in for NIL, and this is going to be great for college athletics and the beginning of the end for the NCAA, which I could not be more excited about to see the NCAA falling apart right before our very eyes here.
All right, let's head up north. Let's go to Iowa State. Matt Campbell. Again, this guy's a hell of a coach. He's putting together a big program. They're not there yet, but they're coming. And that guy's a great coach up there. What are your thoughts on Matt Campbell and Iowa State?
I love Matt Campbell. There's another Big 12 coach that's turned down NFL jobs left and right to stay there in Ames. And they've taken care of him. They're doing some stadium renovations. They've put the money into that athletic department. He's done an incredible job. You could argue that he has done the best coaching job in the country right now. They were, you go back to 2014, Kansas and Iowa State were in the same exact spot.
Right.
Look at where Kansas is at now. Look at where Iowa State's at. They made the right hire, and it has paid them dividends to do what they've done with Matt Campbell. And this year's roster, you got a big three on offense. Brock Purdy, I think, is an NFL quarterback. I've been a big fan of his ever since his freshman year. This guy makes plays in big-time moments. He doesn't have the strongest arm, but he steps up when his name's called upon. Breece Hall is as good as any running back in college football. Charlie Kolar at tight end is just terrific. And believe it or not, he's actually a guy that is from Norman, Oklahoma, that Oklahoma missed on. That I'm sure they're regretting they didn't bring him in. He was a big Sooner fan and was in an OU family, but didn't get recruited by OU. Now he's looking like one of the top tight ends in all of college football. So those guys stayed. They stayed together. They all could have gone to the NFL, head coach, the big three included, but they wanted to run it back one more time.
Right.
I think if you're Iowa State, what you're hoping for is that you take care of business, in the regular season, beat Iowa, do those things, and hope you split with Oklahoma. If you can either win the game in Norman or the Big 12 championship against Oklahoma, split those two and be competitive, then you got a great shot to make the college football playoff. I think that's your goal. You can't lose to anyone else other than somebody named the Oklahoma Sooners. Otherwise, Iowa State's in great shape.
Yep. No, I agree. He's done a great job up there. Like I said, that's another guy that I could see, again, depending on how this whole Big 12 blows up with the conference, he might say it's time for me to get the hell out of here and go to the NFL, or he's going to be a hot commodity for these other big time college jobs too. So if the Big 12 blows up, you could definitely see Matt Campbell going somewhere else.
Well, think about like Michigan. We know how much that's been disappointing with Jim Harbaugh. How much better off would they be with Matt Campbell right now? Right. That's one program that comes to mind, and he knows how to recruit that area already. You look at some of these other jobs that are about to pop up. I think USC is going to open. Some of these others, he is going to be the number one name on all those college jobs and all those NFL jobs too. His day is coming.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. All right, give me a sleeper team or two in the league that that we're not talking about.
TCU is a team I'm watching for. TCU is a program that's been solid the last several years. They've beaten Texas 7 out of the last 10 years. Gary Patterson did an incredible job transitioning this team to the Big 12 over this last decade. And at quarterback, you're looking at Chandler Morris, I think is going to be the guy. He was at Oklahoma last year. If you recall, he actually played some of that Cotton Bowl. It looked pretty dang good. But he knew that, hey, look, Spencer Rattler's there, and they got another 5-star quarterback in Caleb Williams coming in, that he just wasn't going to see the field with as good of the quarterbacks that Lincoln Riley's bringing in. But, if Chandler Morris is your starter, or at least your number 2 option, you're in good shape at that quarterback spot. And we know that TCU always has a good defense. I'm looking at the Horned Frogs as a team that maybe could finish as high as 3rd or 4th in the Big 12 this year. The team that really fascinates me is Oklahoma State. And I think that you can measure the strength of the Big 12 based on how good Oklahoma State is. They need Spencer Sanders to take a big leap this year. And if he doesn't, then Shane Illingworth right behind him needs to be that guy. They have some options there, but they really need to step it up a bit. They've had some issues on the offensive line. They need that to improve. We know Oklahoma State's always going to have playmakers, at running back and a wide receiver. They haven't struggled with the skill positions, but if they can get that offensive line going, and if Spencer Sanders can take a big leap, watch out. Oklahoma State could be a team that surprises some folks and win maybe 10 games this year. Those are 2 teams to watch for, TCU and Oklahoma State, besides OU and Iowa State.
I got you. All right. You're listening to Tyler Jones of the Jones Report podcast. He's also an anchor for local news TV, local news live TV out of Omaha, Nebraska. You can see Tyler on over 100 stations around the country. He's doing a great job. He does lots of different stuff. He's very dialed into the Big 12. Couple more things, Tyler, we'll get you out of here. And by the way, Applebee's does have some good late night menus, and Chili's does have a good chicken salad for lunch.
Hey, Texas has their moments. Every once in a while, they win the Red River Shootout too. So sure.
What's the best place, for a game? What outside of Oklahoma, Texas? What's another great environment or two to go see a game in the Big 12?
Man, it's I think it's Stillwater at Oklahoma State. I mean, that place seats 60,000, and they tailgate like crazy. And the big reason I love going there is that Eskimo Joe's. I mean, you got those incredible cheese fries there, and the game day atmosphere. I had a lot of friends that went to OSU, and so I love to get down there whenever I can. I try to go down to Oklahoma State once a year, but they do it big there in Stillwater. They have a great game day atmosphere and do things well. And And that's the place I would go. If I wasn't going to Oklahoma or Texas, I would spend a game day at Oklahoma State. They do things big, and Kansas State's also another fun one too. I mean, they have a real family atmosphere. Especially if you got kids or something like that, and you're looking for a place that people are going to treat you right and such. Kansas State's going to be that place. And even as a Kansas guy, I feel at home going to K-State because they're so kind and so gracious there, and do it big. They know big time college football there in Manhattan, Kansas too.
What are your thoughts, Dave Aranda at Baylor post Matt Rule? How do you think that the whole Dave Aranda regime is going there at Baylor?
Well, things didn't go too hot last year. Now, granted that they lost a lot of guys, and it was going to be a down year, even if Matt Rule was there.
Right.
But I didn't expect them to be that bad last year. And I get it. COVID threw everyone a curveball. Some teams reacted better than others to COVID. So that is a valid excuse. But I mean, it was something everybody dealt with. They had problems just even playing games. I think Baylor had more games canceled or rescheduled than anyone else in the Big 12. They had some serious COVID issues to deal with. But Dave Aranda was a guy that didn't do too hot as defensive coordinator of Texas A&M, and he was kind of the weak link at LSU. That national championship team, they won the title not because of the defense, but because of what Joe Burrow and Joe Brady put together on that offense. So I'm not high on Dave Aranda there at Baylor. I think that they can bounce back and potentially get themselves to 7 or 8 wins again. But I'm skeptical, to say the least, when it comes to Baylor and their future under Dave Aranda. I think the jury's still out on him.
All right, who do you got in the title game?
Oklahoma and Iowa State. I think that's pretty easy to pick those two to have a rematch of last year's Big 12 title game. They're the two best teams. They're on a whole nother level compared to everybody else. It's just a matter of, they can't slip up a bit. Oklahoma has lost to K-State 2-3 years in a row. Iowa State has suffered some losses to Oklahoma State the last several years and such. So, if these two teams take care of business and do what they're supposed to do, there's no reason why Oklahoma and Iowa State won't be in the Big 12 title game. For Oklahoma, I think that you look at, if you split with Iowa State, you are in the playoff, about a 90% chance you're in. If you're Iowa State, you're hoping for a split, but you'd prefer, if it's a split, it's the Big 12 title game you're winning between the two. I don't think it matters for Oklahoma which game they win, but the Big 12 title game would be preferred, obviously. But I think that's what you're hoping for if you're both these schools, is that you get at least a split, that both games are competitive and you both make the playoff. But I don't think that's out of the question, that both these teams could be in there when it's all said and done. But just take care of business, do what you're supposed to do, and they're going to be in good shape.
Well, before I get you out of here, I got to get one more little dig on you. I know you're a huge Kansas City Chief fan, and obviously I'm a huge Tampa Bay Buccaneer fan.
Oh,
the beatdown in February, man. We haven't talked since. It was a full beatdown, my brother.
That was brutal, man. But you know what? We've moved on to 2021. Chiefs are the favorites once again. I like that, what they bring to the table. That offensive line just got eaten alive in that Super Bowl with Eric Fisher and company, being out of that game last year. Mitchell Schwartz, there was out there 2 starting tackles, and the Bucs defense just attacked Patrick Mahomes on all sides, and he was running for his life that entire game. Now you bring in Orlando Brown, you bring in Creed Humphrey, a whole new offensive line there. The defense looks really good too. This is the best Chiefs defense we've seen in years, and that's always been the weakness of the Chiefs. This team's going to be really good. I like what Kansas City brings to the table.
The Bucs, they're motivated, and they got some motivation.
They are. And they love to play with a chip on their shoulder of some sorts. Tyrann Mathieu always feels like he's doubted a bit, and Patrick Mahomes, just that little Michael Jordan type of motivation here. The Chiefs are going to be good. I have them winning the Super Bowl. it's just a matter of who they're going to play. I think I'll say this, though. As far as the way the National Football League shapes out, I think you're talking about 8 teams that are all way better than everybody else. I think the Chiefs, in the AFC, you got the Chiefs, the Titans, Browns, the Ravens, and the Bills.
Yeah.
And then in the NFC, it's the Bucs, it's the Rams, and the Packers.
Yes.
Those 8 teams have separated themselves.
I agree.
Once you go beyond those 8, the league is actually kind of down this year as far as that goes. I think it's going to be that group of teams. It's going to be much tougher to go through the AFC than it is going to be to go through the NFC this year. But it's going to be fun to watch. I think it's the Chiefs, and I got the Rams getting to the Super Bowl. I think the Rams find a way to get it done. Eventually time's got to catch up with Tom Brady at some point, Father Time, but I'm not counting on it, but we'll see. So
there you go. All right, tell everyone where they can find you online with the TV broadcast and with the Jones Report.
Well, Jason, appreciate you having me, man. Easiest way to find me: Twitter, Facebook, Instagram at Tyler Jones Live, and keeping the folks updated with all sorts of stuff going on. We're in the summer of Jones right now and just living it up the last couple of months on the road and such, and having a great time doing it, and doing my podcast each and every week, the Jones Reports, talking to some of the biggest names in sports and entertainment each and every week. And I certainly have a great time doing that show and doing TV here in Omaha, Local News Live. We just launched in January. We're on 100+ stations within the Gray television sphere across the country. We're about to add some new stations. It's great to spot out Meredith, so we're adding them up and really expanding on that. Certainly excited about what our company's putting together in the path forward. So just a lot of good stuff going on. A lot has changed for me within the last few months. I moved to Omaha in January, but haven't looked back and excited about what's ahead. Best is still yet to come.
Well, man, keep up the great work. Do a great job, man. And we'll definitely talk soon as we progress through the football season, man.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Jason.
Have a great weekend, buddy. See you.